Good morning. Welcome to this circle. Welcome as we gather as spiritual community with one another. We gather on this day, which marks the beginning of Restorative Justice Week in Canada. And so as we continue exploring habits of the heart, today we explore the habit of seeking justice. We welcome each of you as you take your place in this circle. Whether you have been in this circle many times or never been in this circle before or haven't been in this circle for a long time, you are welcome here. It's important to each of us that you are here. And so we come with one another to remind ourselves what it is we seek when we gather, seeking wisdom, seeking comfort, seeking strength, seeking justice. We sing as we gather. As we center ourselves in this time and place, we respond to each other with the words we find before us. We are a generous people. We are a kind and caring people. We are a justice-seeking people. We are a compassionate people.
But sometimes we neglect opportunities to express our love and gentleness.
We are a people who seek to live our highest values and bring our best humanity to all the circles in which we live.
This is a time to deepen our resolve to live the values we cherish: respect, love, honesty, courage, humility, wisdom, and truth.
And so, as a way of strengthening our intentions to live in those ways of which we've spoken, we pray with one another. We are here with our yearnings to engage life with spiritual depth. We come to seek ways to live fully and love deeply, to be inspired by wisdom teachings that nudge us to live from a deeper consciousness. We bring our evolving understandings, our openness and our tunnel vision, our curiosity and our fear. In the midst of all that shapes us, we seek the wisdom to pursue justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. Amen.
We light this candle because our gathering needs the light of community. We light this candle because our lives need the light of spirit, wisdom, and awareness. We light this candle because places like Paris and Beirut, like Kenya and Baghdad, need the light of peace and comfort, the light of calm and compassion. We light this candle because our world needs the light of hope and restoration, the light of healing and restoring song. We let this candle in our midst be the reminder of our needs for light and the hope and the awareness that we are also that light. Welcome to the Time for All Ages. I invite anyone who wants to come to the carpet to join me here. Did you know that this is called our Time for All Ages? And that means that even though there's all of us here in the carpet, that this is a time for everyone. And so it's great that we get to be right here close to the action, but everyone gets to kind of listen in and hear what we're talking about. And so today is, everyone loves stories, right? Today's not a story, but everyone is going to love to participate in this because it's something we can all do. There are times when we hear bad news in the world. Sometimes we hear our parents talking about bad news and bad things that are happening in the world. Sometimes we see it on the news or maybe on the front page of the newspaper, or maybe we hear our friends talking about it. Sometimes bad things are just happening in our own lives, like a friend is mean to us or someone says a bad word and we don't like it. And
Like a swear?
sure, yeah. All of these things happen when things just kind of feel icky and yucky.
And a good word is like...
So sometimes bad things can be really, small things that happen in our lives. Sometimes they can be really big things like earthquakes and hurricanes and things where it's a big disaster and lots of things are damaged and lots of people die. And those are terrible things to hear about. And sometimes it's because people are being violent and making really bad decisions in their lives and hurting other people. All of these things happen in the world, and it's kind of terrible to hear about those things. And when things like this happen, we have to be prepared to know something we can do. So I want to talk about that today, because we've all got important jobs when we hear of terrible things happening. Even though we're a long way away from where it happened, that's okay. We still can have something to do. So I want to give us 3 ideas of things we could do. The first thing is that we can feel sad, that it's okay to feel sad and mad and all the other things we feel. And because we can imagine that people in places where things are happening that are not so good, we can imagine that they're feeling pretty terrible. Maybe they're feeling sad because they've lost a loved one, they've lost friends or family, they've died. Maybe they're grieving, maybe they're upset, and we can be sad with them. So that's the first thing, is that it's okay to be sad and angry and wonder about what all of this stuff is about. So the first thing is we can be sad. The second thing that we can do is we can pray and wish the best possible things for people that are hurting. That's really important because we can send our love. We have lots of love. We can feel love and we can send love and we can send our dreams and all our positive thoughts to them. And sometimes there may be ways of helping even beyond just kind of what we think and feel. Maybe there's ways we can help, sometimes our parents can send money. Sometimes we can do little things to make a big difference with our time or doing something helpful. That's always a great way. So the second thing we can do is we can wish and dream the best things for people that are hurting and help them if we can. And then there's a third thing, is we can be brave and we can be hopeful. So, you know how the Earth goes in a circle? The Earth rotates around. And because the Earth rotates around, we have night and day, right? So when we're facing the sun, it's daytime. And when the earth's turning and we're facing away from the sun, what is it? It's night. Yeah. The easiest question you'll have all day. So for us, that seems like just a really silly thing to say. But you know what? The earth and the sun teach us things because of what they do. They teach us, the earth and the sun, teach us that even when it's night, the earth keeps moving. And pretty soon, it'll be daytime again. And that cycle teaches us that when we're feeling sad or angry, or when we're feeling really kind of down about kind of terrible things that are happening to us or to our world, it means that, you know what? Something better will come one day. Something better will come. Even in sad times, better times will come. And this is how we hope. That is what we have to teach each other, is how to hope. When I was a little kid, there was a guy on TV. And his name was Mr. Rogers. And he had a lot of great things to teach us. And one of the things is he said that when something bad is happening, when something terrible is happening, always look for the people that are helping. I know there's a lot of people that, if something terrible is happening, there's a lot of people that are scared and a lot of people that are hurting, but also look for the people that are helping. And I think the reason he taught us to do that is because he knew that we wanted to have hope. He knows how important hope is for us. So when we look for people that are helping, we can know that lots of people are helping people when they're in trouble, helping people when they're sad and angry, helping people when they really need it. So we can bring that there are lots of people who are very good at helping, and we too can be helpers. And that's a grateful thing. So we have to remember how to remember this. So here's how we're going to remember this. We've got carpet right here. For those of you not sitting on a carpet, well, I guess you'll have to make do with your hand or your leg. Take your finger like it's a pencil. Got it? And whether it's your hand or your leg or the carpet, we're going to draw some things, okay? So the first thing I said was that we are allowed to be sad with other people, to care about how other people are feeling and feel that way too. So can everyone draw a sad face? Mine's got two eyes and an upside down sad mouth. Did you do it?
I'm done.
Okay, good. Me too. So that's there on our hand or leg or carpet, and that helps us remember we're allowed to be sad. The next thing we talked about is that we can pray and we can wish really good things for people and help them in simple ways. Good. Now, if we're sharing love, the symbol that means love to me is a heart. Does everyone know how to draw a heart? Let's draw a heart. This reminds us that we can help by sending love, doing simple things, feeling simple things, and caring. So we've got a sad face and we've got a heart. And the third thing I talked about is that we can have hope that things will get better. Because you know what? It's so important that we have hope that things will get better. Always things will be better if we have hope. So the sun teaches us that. So let's draw a sun. I like to draw a circle with the lines around it. Is that how? Oh, you can do it however you like. Perfect. So what are those three things? What's the one we drew? A sad face. Yeah, we can be sad. We can be sad with others as they grieve and as they are sad. Then what's the second one? A heart. What does the heart mean? What are we sending to people? Our love. That's right. Very good. That's an important job, to send love in all different ways. Good. And what's the third one? A sun. You could draw a happy face too, that's okay. A sun reminds us that there's always hope, that things will get better, because there's lots of people to help. You know what I love about this? We can do this whenever we're feeling like we need something to think about or do, or when we're feeling afraid. We can draw these. You know, if we're lying in bed, I like to draw them on my sheets. If we're driving in the car, well, you probably don't drive, but you're in the car, you could draw them on your window. You can always draw these, and they remind us of the 3 important things we can do. So thank you for learning that with me. I hope it will be helpful. We're going to sing a song, and as we do that, I want to invite you to Kids Spirit this morning, where there's lots of other things to do and good things to talk about and hear. So, thank you for coming up here. Let's sing.
In our own nation, many have called for an inquiry into the more than 1,100 missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls. A remarkable young artist by the name of Jamie Black, who makes her home in Winnipeg, has done an incredible piece of work in an installation that appears in many places called the Red Dress or the Redress Project. Here's a few words from her about this work that she has undertaken and a glimpse at where this work has been experienced. This is the work of a contemporary artist.
May
Our religious tradition tells diverse collections of writings that reflect how different people at different times have understood who God is and the relationship that their clan and their community have had with that God. The writings from this part of the Hebrew Scriptures from which we read today in the book of Judges lets us glimpse a time when that relationship was held in a belief in a God who was their warrior and their protector, in a belief that their God was one to appease and to worship lest his jealousy and anger be stirred. This is one of those violent religious stories that is a product of that time. Jephthah made a vow before God. If you give me a clear victory over the Ammonites, then I'll give to God whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in one piece from among the Ammonites. I'll offer it up in a sacrificial burnt offering. Then Jephthah went off to fight the Ammonites, and he beat them soundly, all the way from Aurora to the area around Minnith, as far as Abel-Keramim, 20 cities, Ammonites brought to their knees by the people of Israel. Jephthah came home to Mizpah. His daughter ran from the house to welcome him home, dancing to tambourines. She was his only child. He had no son or daughter except her. When he realized who it was, he ripped his clothes, saying, "Oh, my dearest daughter, I'm despicable. You've brought me so very low. My heart is torn to shreds, for I opened my mouth and made a vow to God, and I can't take it back." She said, "My father, if you made a vow to God, do to me what you vowed. God did his part and saved you from the Ammonite enemies." And then she said to her father, "But let this one thing be done for me. Give me 2 months to wander through the hills and lament my youthfulness, since I will never marry, I and my dear friends." "Yes, go," he said. He sent her off for 2 months. She and her dear girlfriends went among the hills, lamenting that she would never marry. And at the end of the 2 months, she came back to her father when he fulfilled the vow with her that he had made. It became a custom in Israel that for 4 days every year the young women of Israel went out to mourn for the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. Even in this terrible tale our tradition tells, may we find some wisdom for living.
It seems to me that one of the most dangerous weapons we've ever built is fanatical devotion. And we'd like to think that the Jephthahs and their victims are relegated to some shameful, patriarchal, and tribal time that is past in our history. But sadly, these deadly expressions of blind devotion and brute force are far from extinct, as we've seen even this past week. On October 11th, in New Hartford, New York, a 19-year-old young man by the name of Lucas Leonard was beaten to death in the sanctuary room of his church by his parents and by 4 deacons of that church. His mother and his sister are also charged with assault. His father and other church leaders are charged with manslaughter. This violence occurred during a counseling session initiated by their pastor and seems to have been supported by her, and in her mind and in the minds of those who participated, it was authorized by their interpretation of the Bible. His crime? He was beaten with fists and electrical cords for more than 8 hours as a punishment for the sin of wishing to leave the Word of Life Christian Church. He was beaten to death by dangerous, deadly, misguided devotion. No single religious tradition holds a monopoly on such deadly devotion or such misguided piety. It was 3 years ago now that the parents of the 3 daughters in the Shafia family were convicted of murdering their daughters and the husband's first wife by drowning them in a vehicle submerged in a Kingston canal. For the accused, they claimed it was an honor killing in a contorted and misguided understanding of their religion and their culture. And for the victims, it was a sentence of death for seeking their independence and freedom from domestic abuse and from the control of a contorted ideology. Deadly devotion piloted planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Deadly devotion has caused parents to refuse life-saving treatment to their children, has led an entire community of women, men, and children to drink arsenic-laced Kool-Aid, has persuaded young men and young women to strap bombs on their bodies and open fire with automatic weapons in the false name of some God whose reward they seek in the service of their vengeance. Jephthah is not a relic of the past, but a stark warning of dangerous devotion. Although he takes up several chapters in the sacred texts of both the Jewish and Christian scriptures, his is not a story we tend to tell in synagogues and churches. Children's Bible story books generally jump from the violence and warriorhood of Joshua to Samson and give Jephthah a miss. It's not a bedtime story any parent's going to want to read to their children. And Jephthah's story is not fraught with any moral ambiguity like the story of some parents who struggle with how to alleviate their children's pain, or how to face their children's hunger, or how to determine which child to pick up when you have to flee the horrors that are being perpetrated on your village. Jephthah's story is a terrible tale of the perils of piety, of reckless religion, of a vow that makes victims. But like the rest of us, Jephthah has a story, and he is a story. According to the legend, he is a scandalous child, the son of a prostitute. We can imagine the bullying and the brutality he faced as a child who was always identified as the bastard son of so-and-so. After their father dies, the legitimate sons cut him out of the estate, put him out of the family, turn him out onto the street. Jephthah, like so many young men and women, seeking to belong, attaches himself to a gang, a guerrilla unit, an extremist organization. He finds a bunch of bullies to hang out with, and he makes a name for himself as a gang leader. He becomes a renowned street fighter, and why not? He has spent his whole life fighting for a place in his family, struggling to survive in a family that rejects him. But when war is on the horizon, he is sought out by the very clan that rejected him. Now he can do something for them. Now he's worth something to them. And when negotiations fail between Israel and the Ammonites, Jephthah arrives with his bargaining chip. He will fight for them if they agree to make him their commander-in-chief. How often has that agenda been repeated? A wounded psyche is drawn like a magnet to achieve power and recognition. And when power isn't even enough to fill the void, he reaches for piety. He makes a reckless and irresponsible vow. Power and piety can be a deadly duo. So as the terrible tale goes, when he got religion, he makes some grand gesture before his cohorts that when their God gives them victory in the battle, he will celebrate that divine deliverance by sacrificing the first thing that comes through the door to greet his return home. What seduced him into making such a stupid and unnecessary promise? And what in the world would make one keep such a senseless promise? Did he think it was going to make him a hero? Did he think it was going to secure his place in the community and in history as valiant and virtuous? Was his ego more important to him than his daughter's life? How could he be so blind to the consequence of his vow? He had to have known some innocent bystander with no stake in his promise was the one who was going to pay the price of his egotistical boast. And who did he think it would be? In classic fashion, he blames the victim instead of accusing himself of insanity and losing face. He lashes out at his daughter when she sails across the threshold to welcome him home, and instead of throwing his arms around her and telling her how happy he is to see her in the world of the story, he rages at her and accuses her of shaming him for being in the right place at the wrong time. He doesn't pause for a moment in putting his devotion before his daughter. And she doesn't pause for a moment in putting her devotion to her father before her self-preservation. And there we have it. Everything that's necessary for devotion to move from dangerous to deadly. And this unnamed child becomes the victim of her father's ridiculous vow. There are countless victims of that kind of zeal, of that kind of piety, of religion that lacks integrity and compassion. There are countless victims of victims. Victims of wounded spirits, of those who've been abused and misused, neglected, or mistreated. There are more than 1,100 missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls who have been lured, overpowered, mistreated, and murdered by men like Jephthah, most of whom were likely victims before they were victimizers. And in the events we've just witnessed this week in Baghdad and Beirut and Paris and Kenya, to name only the ones that we know about, the Jephthah story is replayed in its 21st century versions. And the world is quick to dismiss the perpetrators of such horror as barbarians. But they are human beings who have a story we need to hear before they become the headline we hate to hear. In the world of this ancient, tragic tale, before she became a victim of her father's vow, Jephthah's daughter sought and received a reprieve. 2 months in which to live a lifetime. 2 months in which to mourn a senseless and premature death. And not to mourn it alone, but in community with her companions who were as vulnerable as she to the tribal religion of their fathers and their mothers. Those who were as vulnerable as she was to being sacrificed by a society, by a system, by a so-called religion that had no regard for them. Those who might inherit uncritically this kind of piety of their parents and their ancestors. And while it's easy for me, in my safe, white, Western, midlife, middle class, someone who has experienced a childhood and a privileged life, while I will never understand, in the world of the story, why she returned, I will understand that I have not walked in her sandals or in the sandals of so many women who have to make that choice again and again in life. While I don't know what it is to live in an abusive relationship, in an abusive home, in an abusive system or faith tradition, there are many who know exactly why she had no power to do anything other than what she did, why she saw no alternative but to submit to her father's fatal ego and his distorted devotion to his God. But what I do understand is the power of the tradition that her story inspired among the daughters of Israel, who for 4 days each year, as the legend goes, devoted themselves to be a community committed to preserving her memory. A community of lament, like the community we form each year on December the 6th to preserve the memory of the women of the Montreal Massacre. Or like the community of memory we form in performance art and photography and fabric art when we participate in the Red Dress Project, the Redress Project. There are many ways we, as women, men, and children, carry on that tradition of the daughters of Israel and enact their legend in the power of lament and the power of memory, seeking to be a community that remembers that it will not repeat the atrocities of the past. A community that will not let devotion be defined by extremists and by insanity. A community that will reject any religion that requires such deadly devotion. A community that refuses to blame the victim for the length of her skirt or the risk of her livelihood, and refuses to see the one who harms merely as victimizer, as some incarnation of evil or something other than human. A community that seeks to honor and teach such deep respect for life, that we will learn how to restore one another to self-respect, to mutual respect, to the kind of healing that imagines justice not as revenge or punishment, but as restoration. There will always be those few whose humanity is broken beyond that kind of healing, but so many more who have been harmed and who have inflicted harm, and whose deepest healing will happen in coming to empathy, in experiencing forgiveness, in knowing reconciliation, in making amends, and in learning a renewed respect for life in response to being heard and being respected. But honoring the value of each life is a habit of the heart. It takes practice. It takes healing. It takes compassion. It takes accountability. It takes all of us. And it begins in choosing to remember the tragedy of lives lost to an act of abusive power or deadly devotion. It begins when we seek to listen and resist the easiness of revenge, when we know that there can be no justice without a deep respect for life. She was someone's daughter.
She knew laughter and tears.
She felt joy and experienced pain.
She was a mother.
She was a sister.
she was still a child.
She was mourned by her family and her friends.
She has a name.
Her life was sacred.
She reminds us of the difficult and tragic history between settlers and this land's indigenous people.
Her death causes us to question some of our assumptions.
Her death causes us to set aside our stereotypes.
She will not be forgotten.
She was a human being, not a statistic.
Her death stirs us to seek a justice that is restorative, a justice that heals. Like the daughters of Israel, we pause as a community of lament, a community of memory, a community that seeks to bring light and hope where there has been such darkness and violence. And out of our lament, and out of our memory, may we bring and be light in the darkness. And that blowing out of the light reminds each of us that we go to be a light. Carol Dillman has invited us to hold in our hearts the light of a particular life, the light of Vicky Cardinal, whose life was taken this week by her husband. Her life will be celebrated tomorrow in the community of Peering Lake. And we hold her and all whose lives have ended tragically and violently. We take our light into the world that we might make it a more compassionate, more just, more fair, more equitable world. We go in the light of love. We go together.